On this edition of Sightings, a woman's childhood nightmares come dramatically to life when she moves into her dream house.
It's startling to realize you have someone standing next to you that existed 200 years ago.
It's one of the most extensive haunting investigations Sightings has ever undertaken. Find out why 1947 might just be the most important year in the history of UFOs.
The summer 1947 wave was dominated by reports of daylight discs. They looked like the product of somebody's technology.
Although science can't explain it, there's no doubting the results of these healing harps.
Several of our students, interestingly, have broken through paralysis.
And the rash of mysterious aerial phenomena continues over the Holy Land.
The UFOs returned dramatically.
Welcome to Sightings. I'm Tim White. Since she was a teenager, Beverly Ehrig has had dreams and visions of an old house and a mysterious stranger standing alone on a windswept hill. It was quite literally Beverly's dream house, and after a chance meeting in a small Maryland town, this California native discovered her dream house was real. She felt compelled, even forced, to move in. And since then, everything has changed.
When I was 16, I started having a mental picture, a vision of a large White House on a hill.
At first, they were startling flashes of thought. A White House out of phase with reality. Over time, the visions grew longer and more detailed.
I would start getting a vision of a man. Age wasn't defined at that point in the visions. It was just a gentleman I knew that somehow knew that he owned the house, he owned the property.
Eventually, Beverly began to fill in more and more details until the visions became a kind of waking dream.
During the dreams, I would start to see the clarity in the interior of the home. I began seeing a gentleman, a Civil War soldier. He was speaking to a young girl, I'd say maybe age 18, 19. She seemed to be very anxious, very concerned that he leave.
A drama began to unfold, one in which Beverly felt she was somehow a player. She felt an eerie connection to the woman in her dream.
Sometimes I would pick up the emotional sense of a very loving situation or a very anxious situation, and sometimes extremely sad, very tearful.
For years, Beverly kept the visions secret. She married, raised 3 children, started a sewing shop. But when the family moved to Maryland in 1996, the whole strange story came tumbling out. It started when Paul Downs offered to rent the Ehrigs, an historic house known as Plenty that Downs had inherited. The minute Beverly went inside, the line between dream and reality began to blur.
It was very shocking to me. It was alarming. I looked at him and I said, "This is the man that I had seen in the Union uniform."
Paul Downs' striking resemblance to the soldier in Beverly's dream was shocking, but no more so than her realization that this house was her dream house.
The further we went through the house, the more I realized this was actually the house that I had had the visions of prior. And coming up the driveway a little bit later, I realized this was also the visions I'd had of the home when I was 16.
Beverly felt she had to move into this house, and as soon as she did, the whole family began to experience haunting visions from another dimension.
Anyway.
On New Year's Day, we were downstairs in the music room, and it was my mother, my sister, and I. We were just reminiscing, laughing, and carrying on. We happened to look over, and a man had walked in the room. It startled all of us, and I think my heart stopped, and I just stood there.
She was very terrified at that moment, and I said, "You need to calm down." I said, "We evidently startled this person as much as they've startled us."
He was wearing a white ruffly shirt with a big ruffle collar and sleeves and a pair of dark pants, and he didn't have any feet.
And we looked up the style of the clothing, and it was the late 1700s.
Not all of the apparitions are this well defined. Beverly's husband, James, has seen ghostly, vaporous forms near an ancient oak in the front yard.
I would look over in that direction, and it would seem like a blurry object would be ducking behind the tree. And it would happen all different times of year. Everything behind it would be out of focus, like something was blocking the light. I don't know if it's out of this world or not. I just know that it wasn't natural.
In the sewing room, both Beverly and her daughter have seen brilliant lights swirl around the room, then disappear in a flash. The family dog also seems to be sensing the strange energy here.
On different occasions, he's wagged his tail and acts as though he's interacting with something that we don't see.
But one apparition in particular haunts her, the one which both Beverly and her daughter have seen.
As we came into the room, I felt almost a chill, and then a very warm sensation of someone had wrapped an electric blanket around you. It was a very, very nice feeling. And instantly got a mental picture of a woman who introduced herself as Mary.
This was the same woman who had haunted Beverly's visions since she was a teenager. Now she had a name, Mary, a name that Paul Downs discovered in land deeds from 1834.
If you go back in the deeds, there was a doctor and his wife by the name of Mary Diggs that did live in the house, Robert Diggs.
Mary and the other spirits, which the Earigs now believe are inside this house, all make their presence known through vision and sound. James has heard voices talking in hushed tones. Beverly and Alethea have heard footsteps, slamming doors, and furniture being moved. And it's not just the spirits of Mary and the soldier that want their presence known.
I was cleaning the top of the staircase and stood up and stepped back and physically bumped into someone. And it was a gentleman I had never seen before. He was dressed in, I would say, late 1700s. Of course, it's startling to realize that you have someone standing next to you that existed 200 years ago.
Was this hallucination? Had Mary transferred her visions to her family? No, she had not, because others who had lived here before had also seen and heard echoes from the past. As a boy, George Gardner lived at Plenty, and he told the Earigs they were not the first.
I would hear strange things, like I would hear the piano playing, and then at other times I would hear voices, lots of voices, like a group of people having an animated conversation, even sometimes like an argument.
George's niece, Carmel Bender, moved into the house in the late 1950s. She too heard voices and footsteps, but it was one eerie encounter on the staircase that still haunts her.
I remember feeling this something above me, and it was a male spirit hovering above me, and he asked me if I was okay.
Carmel recalls following the spirit into the master bedroom, where it was joined by another entity.
They're transparent and white, and they were talking and arguing in the master bedroom in front of the fireplace. And I finally got to see what I'd been hearing for so long.
Carmel believes she knows the identity of these spirits. One is her grandmother, Evangeline, who died in this very same bedroom under mysterious circumstances. The family was told that she'd hit her head on the bathtub, but Carmel has always doubted that this is the whole story.
There was never an autopsy done. My grandfather didn't want one done. And her death was kind of a mystery because we don't really know if she fell and hit her head. And I think that restlessness from that death may have something to do with restlessness here in the spirits that live here.
With so many separate and credible accounts, and Beverly's eerie connection to the apparitions here, Sightings has asked 2 renowned paranormal investigators to comb the house for answers, to use the scientific means at their disposal to draw out the haunting activity at Plenty. Thomas Wolfe may have said, "You can't go home again." But Beverly Ehrig believes she has come home. And she believes the reason that she's been drawn to this house is somehow connected to the haunting activity inside. When Sightings returns, our scientific investigators begin to search for answers.
Next, hard science turns up some fascinating results when Sightings conducts a full investigation of the Ehrig home.
You can feel a presence of someone in here.
In 1996, Beverly Ehrig came home to a place she'd never been before. A quaint Maryland plantation house that she had dreamed about for more than 20 years. Strangely, in an area full of historic homes, Beverly's is the only one the people of Port Tobacco don't seem to know anything about. All that is known is that the place is haunted. Beverly's house is now the site of intensive research being conducted by two eminent paranormal investigators who will try to identify the possible causes of the haunting. Al Rober, an expert in the collection of electronic voice phenomenon, will attempt to capture sound imprints on blank audio tape. He will use electromagnetic sensors to pinpoint the best recording locations.
EVP voices are actually voices that are commenting on things that are current, that are there. It's almost as if they're watching your every move. I mean, you know, you'll be doing something and they'll comment on it.
Parapsychologist Dr. William Roll will use special computer software and instruments to test for electromagnetic anomalies and other environmental factors that may be influencing the haunting here.
What's called hauntings may consist of natural occurrences.
Rober believes that because of its magnetic sensitivity, blank audio tape can pick up voices from another dimension. Rober begins by taking electromagnetic field readings and recording his findings.
You can feel a presence of someone in here.
People have reported that.
Right.
Spikes on the meter indicate possible sources for the haunting. Rober did not know that this is the location where the Ehrigs have seen the spirit they call Mary. But he found it with electronic equipment. He also pinpointed the location of another ghostly encounter based on his field readings. These are the locations, the master bedroom and Alethea's bedroom, where Rober will set up his EVP recording systems. These are the places where he believes the electromagnetism is ripe for haunting.
I certainly wouldn't doubt that there is activity in this house. As a matter of fact, I think there's probably strong evidence that there is.
Rober believes that a television tuned between channels creates a positive magnetic field that may attract the spirits. It is placed in the bedroom where Alethea has been awakened in the middle of the night by a warm, amorphous presence.
We'd like to ask or welcome any of the entities in this house to please utilize this microphone and this tape recorder, imprint your voice on this tape, and answer some questions for us. Come through, use the television. Who are you? Are you the person that was in Alethea's bed?
Later, reviewing the tapes from this recording session, Rober discovered what he believes is a male voice imploring, "Please, please." Dr. Roll asks, are these strange electromagnetic effects caused by the haunting, by psychic energy, or by natural phenomena?
Magnetic fields, magnetic energy, can have two effects. It can produce straightforward physical occurrences which may seem really strange, such as floating lights, electrical discharges that will sound like somebody knocking on the door or even footsteps. And then also magnetic energy may interact with the human brain to trigger parapsychological occurrences, so-called psychic phenomena.
Dr. Roll does a complete geological survey of the area first, because he believes that fault zones and rivers can affect electromagnetic fields. He has also found that homes built on a hill are often built on layers of sandstone that can store large amounts of electricity naturally, and that electricity may sometimes be discharged in bursts.
With respect to plenty, this estate, the bedrock is about 2,000 feet down, so that's a substantial distance. We don't feel at this time that we are really dealing with natural sources of magnetic energy, but rather man-made magnetic energy produced by electrical installations, really.
Having excluded geological factors, Dr. Roll begins to investigate electrical features inside the house. He, too, pinpoints Alethia's bedroom, where Al Rober had recorded EVP earlier.
This is a place in the house where the electric current feeds into the home. So there's a strong magnetic field in that part of the house. The occurrences tend to happen late at night, early morning. These are the times when the human brain is most sensitive to these magnetic fields, and you will then very likely have unusual experiences.
But Dr. Roll found some of his highest readings in Beverly's sewing room.
Now you see here, look at this very high magnetic field. It's very high. Beverly spends most of her working days in a very strong magnetic field produced by her sewing machines. The lights could be simply electric occurrences produced by strong magnetic fields.
There are also high readings in the master bedroom, where several generations of eyewitnesses have seen apparitions, and Beverly's presence seems to be influencing the meter. Al Rober encourages Beverly to ask the questions during an impromptu recording session.
I'd like to ask if you could please give us your name.
After the session, Rober listened to the blank tape and heard what he believes is another communication from beyond the grave.
The whole concept or idea of getting a voice on tape, and it's a room that apparently there's been a lot of activity in, you know, you're starting to build the blocks that you need to come up with a case for a haunting.
But how did Beverly know about this haunting and this place before she ever moved here?
It's a mystery I would like solved. I would like some conclusion to what's been going on and taking place over the several decades in my life.
Whether the haunting is the result of man-made phenomena, as Dr. Roll postulates, or the result of paranormal forces, as Al Rober believes, Beverly is still left with the vision that has followed her for more than 20 years. So Sightings has asked regression therapist Barbara Lane to work with Beverly, and we've asked psychic Peter James to survey the house.
And the interesting thing now will be if the psychic that comes in to read the house picks up something similar. I think that would certainly be evidential if that had happened.
On the next edition of Sightings, paranormal investigator Peter James will conduct his own survey of Beverly's dream house and attempt to psychically connect the dots in the ongoing mystery of plenty.
Next, the mysteries of Stonehenge are now just a click away. Serious help for abduction victims and the mysterious healing power of harps.
Now, here are some of the stories Sightings is following in the news. Stonehenge, the international symbol of ancient mysteries and supernatural forces, is about to enter cyberspace. Plans are underway to turn the megaliths into a virtual reality playground, and all by the year 2000. In Portsmouth, England, the world's most mysterious monument continues to thumb its nose at the scientific community. But now archaeologists using computer models are beginning to unravel the mystery of Stonehenge. And as their work progresses, you can follow along through the internet.
Until recently, we thought Stonehenge was built round about 2000 BC. But we've recently carried out a lot more work on all the excavations which have been taking place at Stonehenge this century. And as a result, we can show that it was built in about 8 phases, the earliest one of which was 10,000 years ago, 8000 BC.
Researchers at the English Heritage Society are using this new data to create an interactive virtual Stonehenge.
We wanted to look at virtual reality as a means of bringing the stones closer to people.
It is possible on the internet to log on to this model and to experience going to Stonehenge through that medium.
This Stonehenge allows people worldwide to log on and explore unencumbered by ropes, crowds, inclement weather, or gravity.
If someone were to log on, they will see a remarkably sophisticated depiction of the stones, and you can fly in amongst the stone, go in between them, over the top of them. It's a very sophisticated model.
This VR Stonehenge is only the first step in a more ambitious English heritage project, an interactive Stonehenge park to open in Portsmouth at the turn of the millennium.
There will always be mysteries about Stonehenge, and we will work to solve those mysteries. And that is the fascination of Stonehenge, and is the fascination of archaeology.
In Houston, Texas, this study of physical after effects from UFO encounters is raising eyebrows and disturbing questions.
The catalog essentially lists where a case happened, when it happened, who the participants were, where the reference documentation can be found, and then a brief summary of what happened in the way of physiological effects.
Retired aerospace engineer John Schuessler has researched UFOs and their physiological effects for over 15 years and has collected over 800 first-hand accounts.
We used to investigate a case and say, that's really interesting if it's known or it's unknown, and we go on to the next case, go in the file, and no one would ever see it.
Schuessler had a better idea. He created a database of significant close encounters, including many of ufology's landmark cases.
In the Cash Landrum case, it was unique in that 3 people were involved, 2 older women and 1 small boy.
On the evening of December 29, 1980, Betty Cash, Vicki Landrum, and Vicki's 7-year-old grandson Colby all claimed that they had seen a brilliant UFO, belching flames so hot it burned trees, melted asphalt, and disabled the women with permanent physical ailments.
That listing contains such effects as nausea, diarrhea, burns, hair loss, eye damage, cancer, which developed later. These women actually exhibited classic signs of radiation exposure.
Betty Cash is still fighting her cancer, and Schuessler is concerned that others may suffer a similar fate.
The kind of injuries that I am seeing in some of these cases could not be caused by imagination or hypochondria. They're physically real things that happen to real people.
Schuessler's initial study has encouraged many previously reluctant witnesses to come forward and share their UFO experiences. The results of these new cases will be published in a subsequent study.
I know that tomorrow the phone could ring and I can have another case like the Cash Landrum case where somebody was harmed in similar ways. When I spoke to Mrs. Cash and Mrs. Landrum, I was really impressed by the level of their injuries and the product of their misery. And one of the things I promised them was that I would put forth a catalog that medical doctors could have in the event this would happen to somebody else. Their wish was that if it ever happened to someone else, they would get help and not get laughter.
We'll have more stories in the news on our next edition. Now, a look at what's coming up as Sightings continues.
In 1947, no one had ever heard the term flying saucer. Then, Ken Arnold saw one.
Ken Arnold was about as honest a man as they come.
Sightings looks at when UFOs first captured the world's attention.
Reports of mysterious lights in the sky and unidentified flying objects date back to the ancient Egyptians. But something happened in 1947 that would forever change the face of ufology. A civilian pilot flying over Mount Rainier saw 9 boomerang-like UFOs and described them as flying saucers. By year's end, there would be more sightings, rumors of a crash and alien bodies, and the first official acknowledgement by our government that something had to be done. If modern ufology has a birth date, it is June 24th, 1947, the day Kenneth Arnold saw 9 unidentified craft flying in formation over Mount Rainier, Washington State. Arnold, an accomplished search and rescue pilot, was shaken by his encounter. This is how he described it to a radio reporter only hours later.
I could see them only plainly when they seemed to tip their wing or whatever it was, and the sun flashed on them. They looked something like a pie plate that was cut in half. They seemed to flip and flash in the sun just like a mirror in such a way that it almost blinded you when you looked at them through your plexiglass windshield. As I kept looking at them, I kept looking for their tails. They didn't have any tails.
By timing how long it took the UFOs to fly between two peaks, Arnold estimated their speed to be 12 to 1,500 miles per hour, twice the speed of the fastest conventional craft of the day. And Arnold's description of the craft as flying like a saucer captivated the public and etched a new catchphrase in the UFO lexicon.
1947 marks the beginning of the UFO era. This is something that everybody agrees on. What Arnold's sighting did was to give these things a name, flying saucers, and connect them with a larger phenomenon.
Jerome Clark is the author of a comprehensive 3-volume encyclopedia that traces the timeline of the UFO phenomenon. Clark believes that Kenneth Arnold's reliable sighting was one of the most significant events in the history of ufology.
Ken Arnold was about as honest a man as they come. He had bedrock conservative Western values. He believed that a man's word was his bond, a good guy, solid citizen.
Arnold's encounter was significant for another reason. It was the first in a series of sightings by credible witnesses. The next came 2 weeks later, when Captain Emil Smith and his United Airlines crew, bound for Seattle, saw 6 disc-shaped craft. And as Arnold and Smith compared notes, more and more flying saucer sightings were reported.
The summer 1947 wave was dominated by reports of what we now call daylight discs. They looked like the product of somebody's technology. The way these things moved, their extraordinary performance characteristics, caused people to believe that some kind of extraordinary breakthrough in aviation technology had been accomplished.
But the U.S. government disclaimed any connection to the discs. So, when another major UFO sighting came to light just days after the United event, it was Pulp magazine publisher Ray Palmer and Kenneth Arnold who initiated an investigation. On June 21st, 1947, in the waters off Maury Island, also in Washington State, Harold Dahl, his son, and 2 crew members were aboard Dahl's fishing boat when they reportedly spotted 5 or 6 donut-shaped objects.
One of the UFO appeared, from their point of view, to perhaps be having mechanical problems. It was coming down in this falling leaf fashion. When the UFO got down closer to the water, a second UFO approached it. It touched it as if to jumpstart, perhaps. When it jump-started, the first UFO, the one that had been in trouble, dropped some residue. Then all of the craft took off into the sky and disappeared.
When Kenneth Arnold arrived to investigate the Maury Island UFO event, Harold Dahl said he had fragments of crash wreckage, and he had a partner, Fred Chrisman, a man whose contribution to ufology is considered dubious at best.
Fred Chrisman was a guy who had shown up earlier as a teller of tall tales. For example, 2 or 3 years earlier, he had written Ray Palmer, who was the editor of a couple of science fiction magazines, and told him that when he was in Burma during World War II, he had encountered malevolent humanoid creatures and had a machine gun fight with them and had to fight his way out of the cave.
But while public doubt was being cast on Chrisman, Arnold was working behind the scenes with Air Force intelligence officers.
At this point, Dahl apparently became frightened that they were going to get into trouble, whereas Chrisman, who was a more experienced spinner of yarns, thought maybe here was a real opportunity to make some money, to tell a big tale and let it fly. And if he could get it endorsed by the U.S. Air Force, all the better.
That plan was never put into action. When officers Davidson and Brown wrapped up their investigation, they took their research, boarded an Air Force transport, and died minutes later in a fiery crash.
The Air Force concluded, and so did several local newspaper reporters, that this story began not as a well-thought-out hoax, but just as a joke, which was to be played on Ray Palmer, the magazine editor. And it was, of course, inspired by all the UFO sightings that were happening during the summer of 1947.
Maury Island may be most famous today as a great UFO hoax, but there were other witnesses on the water that day.
And Halberter has interviewed one man who did not go public.
Barney Leroy saw the same donut shapes. Barney Leroy saw the UFO in the falling leaf pattern. And Barney Leroy saw the jump start.
Barney Leroy, a local fisherman and a minister, passed away in 1980. But Sightings found Barney's brother Bob, who recounted this little-known side of the Maury Island story.
He said, Bob, one of these discs looked like it was going to crash right near his boat, right over here, maybe 100 yards from the sighting. And he said that another one suddenly came down over the woods and over the trees and touched it. Didn't crash into it, but touched it just enough to give it life, vim, vigor, and vitality.
Is Maury Island the birthplace of ufology's seamy side? Or was it an oracle for future events that would take the world by storm less than 2 weeks later? We may never know. But what is known is that within a matter of months, the Air Force created the top-secret Project Sign to investigate reports of UFOs. And all of the believability and doubt, all of the clever hoaxes and hard evidence that surround the study of UFOs today can all be traced back to one 3-week period in the summer of 1947.
I did see it, and I did clock it, and it's just as much a mystery to me as it is to everyone else who's been calling me the last 24 hours wondering what it was.
The incident at Maury Island is also important because it marked the first sighting of MIBs, the so-called Men in Black. And whether or not Harold Dahl's claims were real, the fallout from his disclosure certainly was. By the 1950s, mysterious G-men wearing black fedoras and driving black sedans were a permanent part of the UFO landscape.
Next, the sounds they make have always been considered angelic. Now, harps might just be miraculous.
There's not much the medical world does with multiple sclerosis.
Imagine you're in the prime of life, healthy, active, embarking on a brilliant career, and then you get a headache. You feel weak, your hands start to tremble. When it happened to musician Ron Price, he was devastated to learn that he had a Parkinson's-like disease. But finding out he had this degenerative disease has led Ron to discover a unique healing therapy that's helping a lot of people.
1, 2, ready, here we go.
Everyone in this beginning music class is fighting a degenerative neurological disease, and their weapon is the harp.
My signature is now legible, whereas 6 months ago it was not. You can actually read my name now.
I have multiple sclerosis, so it leads me in a lot of different directions because there's not much the medical world does with multiple sclerosis.
It just, it makes you feel good, but, you know, it's not a miracle.
The benefits these women are enjoying may not be a miracle, but it is a mystery. Why does this elegant instrument have the power to transform lives? How does this simple act of plucking a string create healing magic?
Several of our students, interestingly, have broken through paralysis. They have been told they will never be able to use a part of their body, that it is essentially dysfunctional. Don't think about it, just get on with your life.
Dr. Ron Price is the first to point out that he is not a healer, a miracle worker, or that he in fact has a cure for anything. He is a simple family man and music teacher from Southern Illinois who has discovered a spiritual energy in music that he now shares with others. For Ron Price has suffered too.
Started teaching in the public schools and did some professional playing and started having some mild problems in terms of tremors with my head. Apparently they had always been there as a child, but I had found some rather creative ways for people not to notice too much that my head was always in motion.
Ron was diagnosed with a rare Parkinson's-like disorder and had to give up his dream of becoming a professional musician.
So I just felt that's what I was supposed to do in life, and suddenly there was no place for me. I continued teaching, and I enjoyed that, but it didn't give me a place for my own creativity, my own expression. So it was rather devastating for a very long period of time.
Ron put his passion into special education and played the harp for his own pleasure. Slowly, he began to notice physical effects.
The first thing I sense is resonance. The vibrations of the harp, much of the sound comes through the back. So you really do feel the vibrations, this incredible thing of sound being made on the strings vibrating through wood.
Ron introduced the harp to some of his autistic and hyperactive students to calm and focus them. And the more he played, the more he felt changes within them and within his own body.
If I played at least 2 hours a day, I felt better, and the symptoms either were minimized or were just not evident to other people.
Exploring the healing power of the harp, Ron, a PhD, has consulted with physician Dr. Amy Haynes.
I'm interested in Dr. Price's Healing Harps program because it's so natural, it's so old, it's so beneficial, and the benefits are so obvious. They're immediate and they're obvious. There's no side effects. There's no harm done to the body, and it's available and accessible to everyone.
Dr. Haynes believes that music affects us emotionally and physically, and she theorizes that the harp, held close to the body, may be transmitting powerful vibrational energy into the player.
I don't think we do fully understand how it helps people. I know there's a psychological and a community benefit. I know that there's a neurological component. There's definitely a vibrational component. And there's also just a sensory component.
We realize that our universe is a vibrating world. That we either set things into vibration or we respond to vibrations. And it would appear that the power of sound and vibrations, selected vibrations on our being, may actually play some role in the healing process. We can only speculate about some of this, but when we observe it several hundred times, there must be something to it.
Since 1983, Ron Price has brought his theories and his love for the harp to others through an organized program called Healing Harps.
The benefits tend to be temporary. In other words, if you don't practice your harp for a few days, you will start to notice decline in function. But we're temporary beings. It's like we have to breathe every day. We have to eat every day. We need to brush our teeth every day. So play the harp every day.
Lisa Fisher is a mother of 3 who was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 1994. Dissatisfied with traditional therapies, depressed and unhopeful, Lisa found the Healing Harps program and was transformed.
When I play, I get real close to the harp, so I can feel the vibrations go through me. And I will totally not feel my body at all. I won't feel the pain in my legs. I won't feel a headache. I won't feel tired. It's just me with the music. And I don't know, it's just I forget about everything.
Lisa knows that performing the harp is not a cure for MS, but it's given her and her family relief and a positive force in their daily lives. Lisa is no longer just a woman with a degenerative disorder. She's a musician whose fingers play the music of angels.
Playing the harp is probably one of the best things that MS has given to me. And I do thank God for that, because there's a feeling in me that I never knew existed, that the harp has opened up.
Some of our members battle very difficult medical and personal things. And we grieve when it is appropriate, we hurt when it is appropriate, but when we get together, it is never a pity party. That is just not allowed.
Is there a vibrational energy to harp music that resonates within us in a healing way? Will medical science ever discover how to channel the benefits? Until it does, Healing Harps will continue to help those it can, making beautiful music along the way.
Ron Price also has a PhD in special education and has used harps in his work with children with learning disabilities and behavioral disorders. In a study, Price found that many kids who were considered violent, unteachable, and antisocial became cooperative, outstanding students after learning and playing the harp.
Next, the Holy Land experiences a UFO flap of biblical proportions.
One can only guess that this was a very, very large ship.
They're back. UFOs are again being spotted throughout Israel, and as we reported on an earlier edition of Sightings, there are those who see these saucers over the Holy Land as an omen of biblical proportions.
It started in 1987 when auto mechanic Amy Arai spotted a fiery UFO over Shikmona Beach near Tel Aviv. His encounter and the debris left behind are as famous in Israel as Roswell is in the U.S. For the next 6 years, reports of UFO sightings, crop circles, and livestock mutilations poured in from all over Israel. But then in 1993, the sightings suddenly stopped. Until now.
In February of this year, 1996, the UFOs returned dramatically.
Barry Shamish is an Israeli journalist and UFO investigator who is researching the return of bizarre craft over the Holy Land.
There's no conspiracy, there's no plan, there's no plot. For some reason or another, there are craft over the skies of Israel.
Not everyone has accepted as fact the presence of unidentified craft over Israel. Photojournalist Yossi Alani was skeptical, even cynical, until he snapped this UFO hovering over the Tel Aviv skyline.
I don't believe in UFOs, absolutely. But I have to tell you that I know what the picture is. It was absolutely unusual object on this bloody on the sky. Absolutely.
As of this report, sightings over Israel are occurring almost nightly. This is home video taken by members of a Tel Aviv family who claim to have seen this same UFO 3 times.
I woke up in the middle of the night. Very strong light was shining on me. It was so bright, it woke me up. It was a big light in the middle of the sky.
My son came to our room and woke us up. He said, "Dad, ma'am, wake up and don't panic. There is a UFO outside in the sky." And we saw a very, very strong light, shiny light in the sky. At that moment, my wife said, let's shoot picture with our video.
By the time of the 3rd sighting, more than 100 people were gathered outside the Shua's apartment building with their own cameras to videotape what has become known as the balcony craft.
The shape of this orange balcony, for lack of a better word, is something like a skull. And there is a line in the middle dividing these 2 levels of what I think are vents. Now, the size of it I can only estimate, but you have a Zoom 200 capturing 2 rows, perhaps 24 windows. I didn't count them. One can only guess that this was a very, very large ship to be captured with that camera.
In tense political times, the UFOs over Israel are particularly unsettling, and some biblical scholars are fueling the sinister nature of recent sightings.
You've got 2 schools of thought here. School of thought number 1 assumes that the angels of the Old Testament are returning. And this bodes very well for Israel. Thought number 2, it's not the angels returning, it's the giants, the Anakim of the ancient scriptures returning. These were the enemies of God that he ordered Joshua, David to destroy. And that bodes very badly for Israel.
Searching the Old Testament for answers to the UFO question has been extremely controversial. But so far, academic researchers have offered little or no explanation for the Holy Land's newest UFO flap.
Barry Chamish believes that the flap over Israel is far from at its peak. He's anticipating that there will be many more encounters, including more reports of contact. And Sightings will continue to update you on this developing story.
If you've had a paranormal experience, please write to us at Sightings. Sightings can also be contacted at America Online at keyword Sightings. Download images, sounds, and QuickTime clips from Sightings episodes. On the internet, access information about sightings and the paranormal at sci-fi.com/sightings.
Until next time, remember, no mystery is closed to an open mind. For Sightings, I'm Tim White.
Next on Sci-Fi, Dark Shadows.
On the next Chronicle.
It was just a fish.
Moby Dick was just a fish.
He's got gills and everything.
Well, that's weird.
Weird is good. We like weird.
Sci-Fi's The Chronicle, Friday at 7 p.m. on Sci-Fi.